Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description notes below the video where you will find links to all of my online shenanigans, including how to get my patterns to knit up for yourself, how to join the Watch Barbara Knits Facebook group, how to support me on Patreon, and how to get my merchandise. Today I have a tiny shawl for you. Look, tiny shawl. It's a smile. It's a tiny shawl. This is a tiny crescent shaped garter stitch shawl, and what is unique, well, not unique, but what is significant about it is about as easy as it can get and still produce like a shawl. The pattern is one row. It is entirely suitable for beginners or an experienced knitter who just wants some comfort knitting. I am going to put a timestamp up here. If you want to jump directly to the tutorial, you can. But for those of you who are beginners, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about yarn and needles before we get started. So those of y'all who just want to get to the knitting, get to the knitting. Those of y'all who want a little more guidance, listen, stick around and we'll talk about. Now, this pattern can be worked pretty much with any yarn that you have. I'm not going to say it can be worked with any yardage, any amount of yarn, simply because you need a minimum amount to make a functional item. Now, the most typical yarn weight to make a shawl out of is a fingering weight yarn with one skein, one 100-gram skein, which is usually in the 400 to 440 yard range. You can make what's considered a shawlette, a small shawl. It will be functional. You can totally do it. If you want a larger shawl that's going to fall longer down your back, then you're going to need more than 400 yards, something upwards like a skein and a half. You can use scraps, whatever you want. Yardage for other yarn weights, what you're looking at is the heavier it gets, you're going to have bigger stitches, you're going to work on a bigger needle, but you will need about 400 yards or more. So you're going to need most of the time to buy more skeins. If I was going to do this in sport weight, you could get away with one sport weight skein that needs to be at least 350 to 360 yards. Again, it's going to be a relatively small piece. If you want to do sport weight, 2 skeins is probably better. Same for DK. You probably want at least 2 100-gram skeins. So DK weight, you're looking around 250, so 2 of those is going to be about 500 yards. That will get you a decent sized shawl. If you're getting up into worsted weight, you're definitely going to need at least 2 skeins, maybe even up to 3. Again, heavier yarn, you're going to really need a little bit more skeins, simply because there's less yardage per skein. Bulky yarn, you're going to be working on a very large needle. You can probably get away with 350-ish yards. It just depends. Frankly, use as much yarn as you have to make it as big as you want, because the way this is going to work is this is the shape of it. This is the tiny version. Anything you make, you just keep knitting, and it will be this same shape, just bigger in all dimensions. You can't make it just longer this way, but keep it narrow, and you can't make it just longer across the neckline and not grow this way. It grows in all dimensions. Needle size. To make a shawl, you typically want something with nice drape. So what you want to do is look at your yarn label, and whatever needle range it says, start your swatch or start your shawl with a needle size 1 above that. So I did this. It is actually a sport weight yarn, and I knit it on a 5 or a 6 would be good. You could even maybe go up to a 7 if you wanted it to look open and sort of lacy. Fingering weight, you definitely want to knit fingering weight for a shawl somewhere in the size 4 or size 5 needle. If you're going to do lace weight, you need like a 3 or a 4. If you're going to do decay weight, you definitely want something maybe 7 or 8. Worsted weight, you can get 8, 9, 10. It depends on your tension and it depends on how tightly you knit. But the main thing I want you to remember is you want your gauge to be more open than you typically would knit it for a sweater. And the information on your ball band is typically assuming you're making a sweater or a blanket or something that needs a little bit more density to it. We don't care about density on this, but you can use whatever needle you want that makes a fabric that you like. Another consideration is fiber content of your yarn. Now, this has been blocked. If you do not block it, it gets a little like hump in the middle right here, and there's more on that when we get to the tutorial. You'll see it more specifically, and if you don't want to block it, just be aware that it's going to have that hump. If you don't want the hump and you want to make it as big and open as you can make it, what you're going to need is to make sure that you're using a yarn that has the fiber content that you know how to block it. You can block acrylic yarn with steam heat. You just need to make sure that you know how to do that before you choose to use an acrylic or polyester yarn. The natural fibers are wet blockable, and so some people find that easier. Just think about that when you are choosing your yarn. Again, you can make this shawl and not block it. It is garter stitch. It's just going to be that kind of mustache shape. It's gonna be more little like droopy than it is going to be a crescent shape. So that is hopefully going to hit all of the questions I think beginners might have. I will put links in the description notes below the video where there will be a link to how to do a cast on and how to do a knit stitch. If you are a 100% beginner, those are their own videos that will help you through those steps. I do them slowly in the upcoming tutorial, but if you need more help, look for those links: how to do a knit stitch, how to do a cast on, and how to do the expandable lace bind off that I used in the little sample. But you can use whatever bind off you want and just make sure it's stretchy enough to compensate for your blocking. So let's get to the tutorial. We are going to start with a slip knot, which is you wrap your yarn around your finger and make an X. You pull this loop out a little bit, reach through it, grab that working yarn and pull it through. This is the working yarn. It's the yarn that attaches to your yarn ball. This is your tail. You need to leave at least 6 inches of tail to weave in later. We have this big old loop. I'm going to stick my needle through that loop, and then when you pull on the working yarn, you can see that tightens it down. That's why it's called a slip knot. We are going to cast on 5 stitches. This is our first stitch. We're going to insert our right hand needle knitwise, which means from left to right, through the front loop, the front leg of the slip knot. Wrap your yarn counterclockwise around your needle, pull that loop through, place that loop onto your left hand needle and leave it a little bit loose. Then going to stick my needle underneath the left hand needle in between the stitches, tighten that yarn just a little bit, wrap your yarn counterclockwise, pull it through, transfer. Real quickly, I'm going to transfer the yarn to my right hand so that if you tension your yarn with your right hand, it works the same way. You put the needle underneath, right hand needle underneath left hand needle, between the 2 stitches that are on your needle, wrap counterclockwise. I have a hard time with this, and pull this through. That is 4 stitches. Push that through, wrap, and put it on your left hand needle. So we have 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now for the first and only row of this shawl, we're going to knit 2. So we insert our needle knitwise from left to right. Don't split that stitch like I did. Wrap your yarn counterclockwise, pull it through. That's 1. Insert your needle, wrap your yarn. That's 2. Now we're going to do a yarn over. You're going to move your yarn to the front of your work by going between the tips of both needles, and then you're going to lay that yarn over the top of the right hand needle, creating a yarn over. This adds a stitch. The yarn goes back to back, going over the needle. That's our yarn over. We're going to insert knitwise into the next stitch and make a knit stitch. We're going to yarn over again. Again, move the yarn between the tips, over the right hand needle, and return to the back. So we are ready to make our next knit stitch. Now we're going to slip this final stitch with the yarn in front to create a neat selvage. If you do not want to do this, you do not have to. You can simply knit the last stitch, but I'm going to make a slip stitch edge. So we're going to move our yarn to the front of our work, moving between the needle tips, insert our right hand needle purlwise through the front leg of the stitch, which means from right to left, and transfer that stitch over without working it. We have added 2 stitches, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that is the entire row. It is knit 2, yarn over, knit to the last 2 stitches, yarn over, knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in front. We're going to do that again. This time, that's the tail, don't knit with it. This time, I'm going to tension the yarn in my right hand so y'all can see it. I am more awkward. This is not my normal way of knitting. So we are going to knit 2. So knit 1, knit 2, our next stitch is yarn over, so move this yarn between the needle tips, wrap back to the back, that was my yarn over, and now knit to the last 2 stitches. So what you do is you just continue to make knit stitches until you can see that there are only 2 stitches left remaining on your left hand needle. So you can see there's 2 stitches here now. So we're going to yarn over. So move the yarn between the needles, over, around, knit 1, then move your yarn to front between the needle tips and slip 1, inserting purlwise like this, slip 1 with yarn in front. Drop your yarn like that. Turn your needles so that all of the stitches are now on your left hand needle. Let's do this one more time. I'm going back to continental style because that's what I'm most comfy with. You watch whatever style works best for you. So knit 2, knit 1, knit, oh, see how that slipped off? I didn't quite get the knit. All you got to do is take your left hand needle, insert it in from like this, from right to left, and then slip that back over, and it is back on your left hand needle. Knit that stitch, yarn over, knit to last 2 stitches. So we're just knitting and knitting until there are only 2 stitches remaining on our left hand needle. Yarn over, knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in front. Okay, one more time with the yarn, English style, with the yarn in my right hand. We're going to, oh, come on. We're going to knit 2. You can see how awkward I am with the right yarn tensioned in my right hand. I want to show that, you know, everybody struggles. So that's knit 1. Knit 2. Yarn over. And then knit to the last 2 stitches. Knit, knit. We are increasing by 2 stitches every row. Knit. There we go. Look, there's 3 left. I'm going to knit 1 more. So I only have 2 left on that left hand needle. I'm going to yarn over, knit 1, move the yarn to front between those tips, and slip 1 with yarn in front. Here you can see it's just, this is the very, very beginning of a tiny shawl. And here is the tiny shawl, but I'm going to show you what it looks like unblocked. This has been blocked. I'm going to show you what it looks like unblocked so you get an idea of the shaping. If you do not block your shawl, this is the shape it is going to have. You can see it has this little bump in the middle, and it kind of is like, makes a mustache shape if you had a curved bottom on your mustache. But this is completely unblocked just off the needles. All I've done is woven in the ends. So you're just going to get this kind of smile. The bigger you make it, it's going to still be exactly this shape, just bigger. And you can see it is definitely has more length than it does depth. This dimension is going to keep on getting longer and longer in this dimension, and this will get longer in this dimension, but at a slower rate. And here it is pinned out assertively. I wanted to show you this stage. Now I just did a quick steam block so I could get this video done for y'all. If you want the most assertive block you can get, you're going to want a wet block, which means soaking for at least 20 minutes, getting all the water out and then pinning it out. You can see I've got a wire. Here's the wire up here. I've got a wire going along the bottom side, and I should have put a wire here, but again, wanted to get this done. But what I wanted you to note is I do not have this center part. This center part, if I wanted to, would pull up like this, but we're trying to get rid of that shape. So I'm blocking to get the shape that I want. Now I'm going to pull the pins out. I hope that that was clear enough for you. If you need to go back and watch it and rewatch it, I recommend that you bookmark the video, save it. Obviously, you can share it if you think you have friends who might like to do this as well. What you simply do is work that single row, knit 2, yarn over, knit to the last 2 stitches, yarn over, knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in front, and you just repeat that row over and over and over again until the shawl is pretty much as big as you want it. You can definitely knit till you run out of yarn. but make sure you leave enough yarn for your bind off, because once it is the size you want, you need to bind off all your stitches. I will link in the description notes below to the expandable lace bind off, which is the one I like to use most of the time for shawls. That is a tutorial all on its own. To do this bind off, you need to make sure that you have a minimum of 3 to 4 times the amount of yarn that you need to bind off. So what I mean by that is if you try to lay your shawl out sort of flat, even though it's still in the needles, and measure the distance, this distance here. So the distance from this point to this point along the bottom of the curve, whatever that distance is, you need 3 to 4 times that amount of yarn. So what you would do is like take your yarn and run it all the way along at once. That's the 1, and then 2, 3, a little bit 4. That's how much you need to bind off. So knit until you have a little bit left and then bind off. If you want the shape that I showed you that doesn't have the hump, you need to block it. If you're fine with that little hump, because honestly, most of the time it's going to be on the back of your neck, or this is going to be wrapped up, it's really not going to be that big of an issue. It's up to you entirely. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to see any pictures. If you make this shawl, you can always tag me on Instagram. On Instagram, I am Tumpedduck, Tumpedduck. It is a little duck. A little duck that has tumped over, which means to fall down. And also you can join the Watch Barbara Knit Facebook group to share your progress on some of my patterns. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up, click that like button. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.